Vrinai Hai Tosudevai Priyai Hai Keshavashacha Vishnu Bhakti Pradedeve Sachavachai Namo Namaha. Vrinai Hai Tulsidevai Priyai Hai Keshavashacha Vishnu Bhakti Pradedeve Sachavachai Namo Namaha. Jai Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. All right, we'll have class this morning. It's Hanuman Jayanti today, so we're going to be speaking about that tonight, not this morning. Okay? So, right, this morning we'll continue with our regular Sri Caitanya Caritamrta class. And then also tomorrow is the celebration of the appearance of Radha Kund. So we're going to be speaking about that during the evening hall program. Prabhupada, Paramahansa Paramacharya, Osutera Satashi Shimad, His Divine Grace, Abhaya Charanada Bhaktivedanta Goswami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anandakoti Vaishnav Vrind Ki Jai, Namacharya, Srila Hridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shidwaita Gadadha Shiva Siddhi Gaur Bhakta Vrind Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopi Gopinath Sayam Mukunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavanam Ki Jai, Turidam Ki Jai, Jagannath Swami Ki Jai, Yamunamai Ki Jai, Srimati Lasi Devi Ki Jai, Samveda Bhakta Vrind Ki Jai, Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharni Nivashesha Shinyavadi Paschatya Dejatarane Somagana Timidanda Shah Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshudam Meditam Yena Tasmai Shigurave Namaha. So as we're doing every day during this trip, and usually every day, we're having the reading of the Sri Caitanya Caritamrta translation, commentary by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. And right now we're reading from the Antya Lila chapter 4, and we're at text number 99 is the next text. And we're talking about Sanatana Goswami's interactions with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and also with Haridas Thakur. So just to reiterate what has happened, Sanatana Goswami has come to Jagannath Puri to see Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and on the way to Jagannath Puri he had all these sores because he went through Bihar, which many of you are from. So anyway, so I went through Bihar, the Jharikhanda forest, got these running sores on his body, and he was feeling so bad. He was feeling so bad that actually he would be offending Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and offending the deities because of these sores, and then also because he had lost his caste, because he had worked for the Muslim government, that he was getting ready to commit suicide. And he was going to commit suicide by jumping under the cart of Lord Jagannath, the wheel of the cart of the Lord Jagannath. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu knew what he was going to do, forbade him from doing that, said that your body belongs to me, to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And I have many purposes that I want to accomplish with that body. So that's also a lesson for us, that our body does not belong to us. It belongs to Krishna. And our spiritual master is meant to be used in the service of Krishna. And so if one claims false proprietorship over the body and does things to the body, of course we got into a controversial subject matter yesterday, which we're not going to talk about today. But if one thinks they can do anything they want with the body, that is illusion, because the body belongs to Krishna. It's like when you borrow someone's car. Oh, I can do anything I want with someone else's car. I can scratch it up. It doesn't matter. Just like I remember the first day I learned to drive, my mother gave me her car, and I scratched it. So it was very disturbing. I was in complete anxiety. Anyway, so, and then we ended up with Haridas Thakur and Sanatana Goswami glorifying each other's good fortune as of the end of yesterday's class. So we're going to continue with text 99 in the Antya Lila chapter 4. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda
Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda
Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda.
Okay, let's start with the Bengali. Sanatana Kaye Tomasama Kiba Hachiyana Mahaprabhura Gane Tumi Mahabhakyovan. Sanatana Goswami replied, O Haridas Thakur, who is equal to you? You are one of the associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, therefore you are most fortunate. Avatara Karya Prabhura Nama Prachara Se Nija Karya Prabhu Karena Tumara Dware. The mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, for which he is descended as an incarnation, is to spread the importance of chanting the holy name of the Lord. Now, instead of personally doing it, he is spreading it through you. In other words, Haridas Thakur is the Namacharya. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually, after he finished his tour of South India, during the remaining years of his pastimes in Jagannath Puri, wasn't engaged so much in preaching. I mean, obviously he preached, but he wasn't traveling and preaching anymore. So his traveling and preaching was just for a few years, I believe it was about 8 years, during the final Ancha pastimes of the Lord. Whereas, of course, he was also preaching in Mayapur when he was living there as a householder in his younger years. But basically, he stopped his active preaching and immersed himself in the internal mood of Radharani's separation from Krishna during these final years. So therefore he assigned his disciples, such as Sanatana Goswami, Rupa Goswami, Raghunath Das Goswami, Jiva Goswami, etc., to carry out the mission. So that's succession. And we were talking about that before. The succession or planning for succession is actually quite important. And we need to do that in ISKCON. And I mentioned that yesterday. Prachaha karan atina laksha nama sankirtana savarahage karanamera mahima katana. My dear sir, you were chanting the holy name 300,000 times daily and informing everyone of the importance of such chanting. How many rounds is that, approximately?
96.
What?
More than that.
How many rounds is that? Approximately 192. 192 rounds. Has anyone here ever chanted 64 rounds? One person. Me too. So, can you imagine 192 rounds? Okay. Apaneya charikaya nakare pachara, pachara karena kaya nakarena chara. Some behave very well, but do not preach the cult of Krishna consciousness, whereas others preach but do not behave properly. Achara prachara namera karaha dvi karya tumi sarva guru tumi jagatera ariya. You simultaneously perform both duties in relation to the holy name by your personal behavior and by your preaching. Therefore, you are the spiritual master of the entire world, for you are the most advanced devotee in the world. So Sanatana Goswami here clearly defines the bona fide spiritual master of the world. The qualifications expressed in this connection are that one must act according to the scriptural injunctions and at the same time preach. One who does so is a bona fide spiritual master. Haridas Thakur was the ideal spiritual master because he regularly chanted on his beads a prescribed number of times. Indeed, he was chanting the holy name of the Lord 300,000 times a day. Similarly, the members of the Krishna conscious movement chant a minimum of 16 rounds a day, which can be done without difficulty. And at the same time, they must preach the cult of Caitanya Mahaprabhu according to the Gospel of the Bhagavad Gita. One who does so is quite fit to become a spiritual master for the entire world. So that's actually what an acharya is. Of course, the word achar basically means behavior, but it's understood when we say someone's an acharya they're also doing prachar. They're also talking about Krishna. So two things must be there. One must have ideal behavior. Like Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, sannyasi or preacher is like a white sheet. That if there's a spot on a white sheet, then everyone will just look at the spot, isn't it? It's like here's a white wall, and if there was one big spot here, that would call the attention to the spot. I mean, everybody would just look into the spot, not at the wall. This is funny. Anyway, mata dvijana nanakata range Krishna kata ashvadaya rahi eka sange. In this way, the two of them passed their time discussing subjects concerning Krishna. Thus, they enjoyed life together. So that's real enjoyment, talking about Krishna. What's that verse in the Bhagavad Gita? Anyone know about it? One of the nutshell verses, how the devotees enjoy talking about Krishna. Does anyone know that verse? What? Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita. One of the nutshell verses. No? Oh my God. Machita. Parasparam. What's the rest? Tushanti cha. Ramanti cha. Right? Actually, these verses are very important. You should all study Bhagavad Gita. What?
We knew the verse, forgot the translation.
See, the problem is when you study in a ritualistic way for a test, you can't random access the verses. See, what I'm doing is because I never studied for a test. I would read the Bhagavad Gita every day when I was a brahmachari. And I would read it over and over and over and over again. So I can actually random access the verses. You understand why random access, like in a computer? If a topic comes up, my mind goes to a particular verse. Whereas yours is more or less linear. Like if I take you to the Bhagavatam, like the 10th Bhagavad Gita, 10th chapter, and I say a certain number of the verse, text 8, you can probably tell me text 8, right? What is text 8 in the Bhagavad Gita? See, that's what I mean. Right? Isn't it? Immediately, you know it because it's linear. But that's not really how a preacher thinks. So that's the problem with all these exams and everything like that, because it gets you to think in a linear way rather than a random access way. And if computers were linear, they wouldn't work, right? Like if you had to go through your hard disk, go from the first thing you put on your hard disk to the second thing to the third thing. By the time you got finished, you'd be dead. So, so it's very important when there's you should always draw some connection between what you're reading and a particular verse or verses. Actually, that's an important point. Yatra kale oila saba godera bhaktagana purvavat kaila sabe rata yatra dharashana. During the time of the Ratha Yatra, all the devotees arrived from Bengal to visit the car festival as they had done previously. Rata agre prabhu taiche karila nartana deki chamatkara khaila sanatanera mana. During the Ratha Yatra festival, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu again danced before the car of Lord Jagannath. When Sanatana Goswami saw this, his mind was astonished. Varsharak charimasa rahila saba nija bhakta gane saba sange prabhu milaila sanatane. The Lord's devotees from Bengal stayed at Jagannath Puri during the 4 months of the rainy season, and Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu introduced Sanatana Goswami to them all. So here's some of the names of the devotees. Advaita Nityananda Srivasa Varkeshvara Vasudeva Morari Raghava Damodara Puri Bharati Swarupa Pandita Gadadhara Sarvabhauma Ramananda Jagananda Shankara Kashishvara Govindadi Atapakta Gana So these are some of the devotees. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu introduced Sanatana Goswami to these and other selected devotees. Advaita Acharya, Nityananda Prabhu, Srivas Thakur, Prakeshwara Pandit, Vasudev Dutt, Murari Gupta, Raghava Pandit, Damodar Pandit, Paramananda Puri, Brahmananda Bharati, Swarup Damodar, Gadadhar Pandit, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Ramananda Roy, Jagadananda Pandit, Shankara Pandit, and Kashishvara and Govinda. Yata Yoga Karaila Sabara Chalana Vandana, Tanre Karaila Sabara Kripara Bhajana. The Lord asked Sanatana Goswami to offer obeisances to all the devotees in a way that befitted each one. Thus he introduced Sanatana Goswami to them all, just to make him an object of their mercy. Sadgune Panditye Sabara Priya Sanatana Yata Yogya Pripa Maitri Gaurava Bhajana. Sanatana Goswami was dear to everyone because of his exalted qualities and learning. Suitably, therefore, they bestowed upon him mercy, friendship, and honor. Sakala Vaishnavayabe Gaudadeshe Gela Sanatana Mahaprabhura Chalane Rahila. When all the other devotees returned to Bengal after the Rath Yatra festival, Sanatana Goswami stayed under the care of the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Dole Yatra Adi Prabhura Sangite Dekila Dina Dine Prabhu Sangaye Ananda Badila. Sanatana Goswami observed the Dole Yatra ceremony with Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In this way, his pleasure increased in the company of the Lord. Purve Vaishaka Mase Sanatana Yabe Aila Jaishta Mase Prabhu Tanre Pariksha Karila. Sanatana Goswami had come to see Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at Jagannath Puri during the month of April, May, and during the month of May and June, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu tested him. Wow. Jaishta Mase, this is an interesting test. Prabhu Yameshwara Tota Harila Bhakta Anurode Tahan Viksha Ye Karila. In that month of May, June, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to the garden of Yameshwara, Lord Shiva, and accepted prasadam there at the request of the devotees. Majjana Viksha Kale Sanatana Bolaila Prabhu Bolaila Tanra Anandabadila. At noon, when it was time for lunch, the Lord called for Sanatana Goswami, whose happiness increased because of the call. Bhajane Samudravalu Hanache Agni Sama Se Pate Sanatana Karila Gamantha. At noon, the sand on the beach was as hot as fire. But Sanatana Goswami came by that path. And actually, the reason he came by that path is because he didn't want to go in front of the temple. And he had all these sores, so he didn't want to contaminate the pujaris. So instead, he burnt his feet to avoid offending the Lord. Of course, it wouldn't have been an offense, but he was thinking like that. Prabhu Valanche Eyanandita Mane Tapta Volukate Papode Tahanahi Jane. Overwhelmed by joy at being called by the Lord, Sanatana Goswami did not feel that his feet were burning in the hot sand. And it's really hot there. Dvipaye Pokshahela Tabugela Prabhustane Viksha Kari Mahaprabhu Kariyachena Vishrame. Although the soles of his feet were blistered because of the heat, he nevertheless went to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There he found that the Lord, having taken his lunch, was resting. Viksha Avashesha Patra Govinda Tare Dila Prasadapana Sanatana Prabhu Pashe Aila. Govinda gave Sanatana Goswami the plate with the remnants of Lord Chaitanya's food. After taking the prasadam, Sanatana Goswami approached Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Prabhu kahe kon pate aila Sanatana tena kahe samudrapate karilun agamada. When the Lord inquired, "By which path have you come?" Sanatana Goswami replied, "I've come by the path along the beach." Prabhukahe taptak valukate kemane aila singadware rapata jitala kene na aila. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, how did you come along the beach when the sand is so hot? Why didn't you come by the path in front of the Simhadwara gate? It is very cool. Singadwara refers to the main gate on the eastern side of the Jagannath temple. It's called the Lion Gate, like Singhadwara. Like it's interesting, like what we cover the deities with is called the Singhasana, not Shringasana. Devotees, most of the times they mispronounce it, they say the Shringasana. It's Singhasana. It's the lion throne. The hot sand must have blistered your souls. Now you cannot walk. How did you tolerate it? Sanatana kahe dukkha bahutana pailun paevrana hanachetaha na janilun. Sanatana Goswami replied, I did not feel much pain, nor did I know that there were blisters because of the heat. Singadware aitimora nahi adhikara Visheshita korera tahan sevakera prachara. I have no right to pass by the Singhadwara, for the servants of Jagannath are always coming and going there. Sevaka gata gati kare nahi avasara tara sparsha haila sarvanasha habe mora. The servants are always coming and going without interval. If I touch them, I shall be ruined. And here's a very interesting important purport by Srila Prabhupada. Herein it is very clearly indicated that priests performing deity worship should be careful to keep themselves completely pure and not be touched by outsiders. Sanatana Goswami and Haridas Thakur, thinking themselves Malechas and Yavanas because of their past association with Muslims, did not enter the temple or even travel on the path in front of the temple gate. It is customary for the priests of the temples in India not even to touch outsiders or enter the deity room after being touched. This is a very important item in temple worship. And actually, Prabhupada instructed us in this, and in the kitchen too. Prabhupada said in the kitchen that if you even touch your clothes, you got to wash your hands. That, of course, in your home kitchen is a different thing. You go crazy if you do that in the home kitchen. But in the deity kitchen, it's like surgery. You know, surgery, you have the surgeons put their hands out like that, and they're not allowed to touch it. If they touch anything, they have to cleanse their hands again because there'll be infection. So I always dealt like that when I was cooking for the deities. Very, very important point. One has to be qualified, and one has to be revolutionary clean. So, Shuni Mahaprabhu Mane Santosha Paela Tushnohana Tanre Kichu Kahite Lagila. Having heard all these details, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, greatly pleased, spoke as follows. Yadyapyo Tumihao Jagat Pavana Tomasparshi Pavitrahaya Deva Muni Gana Tatapi Bhakta Swabhava Maryada Rakshana Maryada Palanahaya Sadura Bhushana. My dear Sanatana, although you are the deliverer of the entire universe, and although even the demigods and great saints are purified by touching you, it is the characteristic of a devotee to observe and protect the Vaishnava etiquette. Maintenance of the Vaishnava etiquette is the ornament of a devotee. You know, it's actually Vaishnava etiquette. There's many items of Vaishnava etiquette. Of course, there's not offending the deities, but even more important is not offending the devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sometimes in the name of devotional service, devotees engage in politics with each other, and that causes the destruction of their spiritual lives if they do that. I was just communicating with a temple this morning because I'm in charge of different temples. Nothing here, nothing in Fiji, but something in the United States. The devotees wanted to have what they call an istagosti, so they can talk politics at the istagosti and criticize the temple president. So I sent them a message. Of course, I'm supposed to be the authority. They can't criticize me. But anyways, as the GBC, I sent them a message. This is some temple in the United States. It's not North Carolina. I sent them the message that Ishtagoshti, Prabhupada's intention with Ishtagoshti was to discuss devotional service, whereas many times devotees have turned that into a general, like, political discussion, which is not really what Ishtagoshti means. Ishtagoshti means you talk about different services for the deities, and you don't denigrate people or talk negatively about people. You talk about how you can improve your service. You talk about plans for the temple, something positive. Prabhupada did not like mob psychology. As soon as you invite a whole bunch of people in the room and you have a talk about management, you got a problem, isn't it? Because then people get into ad hominem attacks, which means personal attacks. So it's actually really, really bad. So anyway, when one doesn't observe that particular item of Vaishnava etiquette, then everything becomes destroyed. And if we respect the Vaishnavas, listen to the Vaishnavas, especially the spiritual master, then we get all success. Yasha prasada bhagavat prasada yasha prasada na gati katopi. Yes, it was for enlivening. Someone sent a message here. Yes, it's for enlivening each other in Krishna consciousness. I'm not saying, this temple president, we have to have a coup d'etat. I don't know if you know what coup d'etat is. It's French, means overthrow the state. You heard about that? Yeah, it's a French word. And it's just like, what? Prabhupada disliked politics. And even Prabhupada encouraged the GBC, we don't get into politics, actually. It's because we're all mature. We've been through it all. Been through the war. It's actually interesting on the GBC level, when I meet one of my GBC God brothers or God sisters, it's like your soldiers that have been in the war together. So there's a bonding, because we've been through 50 years of service to Prabhupada together. So in the beginning of ISKCON, there was actually much more like fighting. But now with the older devotees, it's like we're old buddies. What are you going to fight about? You don't have the energy to fight anymore. Anyway, so maybe one here will take questions. Let's see what verse number we're ending with. We're ending with, text 120, 130 is the last verse. Okay, so we can, actually I did 131. No, I didn't do it. So 120, 130 is the last one. Okay, so who has questions here? The devotees here get their questions. Yes?
Okay, so I know I think during Brahma's nights, everything gets annihilated, correct?
Brahma's nights up to his planet, not everything.
Okay, so then what happens to the souls? Because I know souls can't get destroyed. So what exactly happens to them? Where do they go?
Where do they go?
Yeah.
They go to Fiji.
Nice so.
They got a nice so-so for vacation. Where do they go? They enter into the Lord during that particular time. Just like at the time of the cosmic dissolution. So, but not all the souls. Actually, it's described. Let me go back to my own video. So it's described in the Bhagavatamrita that the souls on many of the higher planets, they actually take their airplanes and go up to Brahmaloka for safety. Like if there's a flood or something like that, you go to higher ground. So in the same way, many of the souls, they actually go to higher ground, which is Brahmaloka, when there's partial devastation. And actually, even there's a partial devastation sometimes when Brahma takes a nap during the day.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? Don't take a nap, Prabhu. Everything's going to be devastated. That'd be pretty heavy, isn't it? Just pray that Brahma stays awake. So, anything else? Any other questions here? Yes.
So Gurudev, in Srimad Bhagavatam, Jadabharata actually revealed himself as a guru to Maharaj Rahugana.
Rahugana, yeah.
So the Guru Tattva, like Maharaj Rahugana was actually ridiculing Jadabharata, and then while he was actually carrying the palanquin.
Yeah, it was chastising him.
Yeah. So what can we learn from that in terms of how can we serve our spiritual master, and what type of Guru Tattva we could have from that, Gurudev?
Well, first of all, one can't judge things from external appearances, because Jadabharata, the story goes, was acting stupid. He wasn't stupid, but he was acting stupid so no one would bother him. And that's a type of yoga. It's almost like Jada yoga. Like Rishabhadev, Lord Rishabhadev did the same thing. In his final years, he just said, I'm having nothing to do with more social interactions. If someone talked to me, just acted dumb, walked around naked and everything like that. Obviously, no one's going to talk to you too much if you're acting like that. Maybe it's a good idea. Thank you for suggesting that. Anyway, so now I can just chant Hare Krishna peacefully, and people say, Guru Maharaj, I'm saying, Hare Krishna. So it's like Babaji order. Like Prabhupada had one of his god brothers, Krishnadas Babaji, and I remember meeting him. And every time you would ask him a question, he'd just respond with Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. He'd start laughing at you. Beautiful devotee. And actually, he didn't act dumb. I mean, he actually chanted Vaishnava songs. He knew the philosophy, but he never talked about any management or anything in this world or anything of this world. That's a Babaji. So, what can we learn from that? First of all, we can't judge someone by the cover, by the body. And, oftentimes we do judge devotees by their body, whether they're from India, whether they're from the West, whether they're male or female, or whether they're children. Just look at Kanna. He knows more than I do about Krishna consciousness. No? I mean, for example, all right, one portion of the Bhagavatam I was just reading dealt with the four Kumars trying to go to Vaikuntha. And so you had Jai and Vijay just like judging them by their bodies, isn't it? Just like let's say four naked kids came to the door here. 5-year-old naked boys. And he said, we'd like to go to Bhagavatam class. You'd probably say, put some clothes or at least diapers or something like that. Whoops, someone sent a message. So you probably wouldn't want him to come to Bhagavatam class in such a condition, would you? And I'd probably be shocked out of my life or something like that if 4 little naked boys walked in the door and sat down for class. So we often times judge. So the Jai and Vijay, the gatekeepers for the 7th gate. There's actually 7 gates. It's interesting, the Bhagavatam talks about that. And even in Christianity, they talk about the 7th heaven, right? Yeah. The same thing. So they went through 6 gates. Nobody stopped them. But then they went through that 7th gate, and it's described that these Jai and Vijay, they had these faces on them, They were angry. Even in the beginning, before they even stopped the 4 Kumaras, they were angry. It showed some anger in their face. That's what Bhagavatam describes. And they were, what are these stupid little kids coming in? So they were judging the devotees by their bodies. And they blocked them. And as a result, they got cursed. Because it was all the Lord's plan, too. So that he could have some nice fighting on the earth planet with Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha in the universe. So, but in the same time, we can learn that one shouldn't judge people according to their body. But oftentimes, this is a political statement, oftentimes in ISKCON, we judge people like in I mean, there's certain temples, for example, where ladies are not allowed to give class, or allowed to do deity worship, or, and we have this whole controversial issue right now about Vaishnavi Diksha Gurus, lady Diksha Gurus going on. But it's just, people aren't their bodies. And a Vaishnava, if you see a Vaishnava according to their body, or a deity according to the element from which the deity is made, one is possessed of hellish intelligence. There's a statement. So one has to be really careful. So that's basically what we learn. And also, you can tell the difference between a fool and an advanced spiritualist by what they say. That's another point. Like Prabhupada told the story about the jackal. You know the story about the jackal? No. He said, once upon a time in the forest, generally Lion King. You've seen Lion King?
Yeah.
Yes.
You saw Lion King. The lion is the king, right, of the forest?
We have nowhere outside.
Yeah,
At the jungle.
Of the jungle. Oh, not the forest, the jungle. Sorry about that. The lion is the king of the jungle. So once upon a time in the jungle, this is a story Prabhupada told it. I'm sure you all heard. Some of you may have heard. But in the jungle, then there was a jackal. You know what jackal is? Jackal is like a wild dog. We like domesticated dogs. Domesticated dogs that love us. Right? So jackal, anyway, sorry about that. So jackal somehow or other had some like blue paint spilled on him, and he was like luminescent. That was glowing. Someone's glowing, you're just like, oh my God, they must be spiritual, must be very advanced. Like coming like a light bulb. Anyway, so he was, somehow or other was some sort of paint, and he looked, wow, effulgent. And so then he came to all the animals, and even the lion got down from his throne and offered his obeisances. And then they said, you can be the next king, you're effulgent. It's judging someone by how they looked. That was the point Prabhupada was making. So he goes up on the throne. Actually, someone says something funny, which I'll tell you in a second. But he goes up on the throne, and he's sitting on the throne, the king of the jungle. And then all of a sudden, it's dusk. Dusk, the sun goes down. And what happens at dusk? I mean, if you've ever been in Mayapur, you know how jackals jackal. That's why they're called jackals, because they jackal. That's a word that's onomatopoetic.
It's called dingo. Yeah.
What?
Dingo.
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 Australian version of wild
Dingo. The dingo. Yeah, the dingo. So, it's dingo. But jackal actually, when a word sounds like what the sound is, it means something and it also sounds like the animal, then it's called onomatopoetic. Like if you had the word bow wow
Bang.
or bang. So many words are like that in English and Sanskrit too. So anyway, so this jackal was listening to the other jackals, which were all his family members. They were calling him home for prasadam. So anyways, and he just responded, however whatever jackals do. And then they understood because he had opened his mouth. He was a jackal. And then the lion, he started to recite the prasadam prayers again. And the lion, the king of the forest, then became prasadam. Okay, and so someone else just mentioned something funny online here that, like, if the 4 little boys without clothes showed up at the door, I would call Child Protective Services. Isn't it? I mean, and the parents weren't there. This is abuse. All right. All right. So you have another question?
Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Go ask your question. I'll put the camera on you.
So you mentioned about memorizing verses of Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
So actually, I have enrolled a Bhakti Shastri course, very interested in learning.
Yeah.
But with commitment of chanting 16 rounds with regular all duties, the day just goes off with minimal devotional practice.
Right,
We do-
right.
We want to read, we want to give time, but there is no time. So how do we manage? Any tips?
That's actually an interesting question, especially if one has a job and has
Yeah.
children, job. You know, I couldn't do all that. Thank God I'm a sannyasi. You know. Yeah, I have plenty of time to chant and go for a walk. Nobody's saying change my diapers or anything. Nobody's saying cook for me. I just say cook for me. Actually, I cook for myself sometimes. So I would say that one has to be very expert in time management and utilize time when you're doing one thing to do two things. For example, you drive in a car, you put a tape of the reading of Srila Prabhupada's books in, and you learn Bhagavad Gita in that way, which is really a nice way to learn. Or you're in, many people take a bus to go to work, so it's the same thing. They can read, they can chant, they can do so many things. I think it's a question of time management. And of course it's easy for me to say that because I don't have too many things to, no family. But you'll find that there is extra time during the day if you're really alert, and you do two things at one time. And I'm not talking about like cooking and at the same time changing diapers, but it's not a good idea. But you can usually fit in, like when I do my deity worship in the morning, I'm listening to Prabhupada's class. When I'm taking my walk, which I exercise every day, which I did early this morning, I'm chanting japa. So I try to double up on certain things and have quality in that way. Or, as far as reading, if you can learn one verse a day. I know in many of these courses, then you have this whole list of verses you have to learn or memorize. I found myself the best way to learn verses was to have one verse each day, and that would be the verse of the day, and put it on like an index card or something, because nowadays people don't have index cards anymore. But put it on an index card, and throughout the day I would explain that verse and think about that verse and think of how it applied to my life and to, people's who I was speaking to in general. And that way I developed this random access approach to, which Prabhupada did too. Like if you read Prabhupada's purports or hear Prabhupada's classes, he'd jump from one chapter to another chapter, just any verse that actually would support a particular point that he was making. So I do have issues with the way that people learn verses, especially like with the children. They learn this chapter, they recite the whole chapter, but they don't really know what they're doing, or they don't really have integrated the information. So I would I'd rather teach it a different way. Anyway, that's just my opinion. But you can, in other words, you can figure out how to. Maybe you can figure out. I don't know your life that well, so maybe you can figure out how to squeeze in things at a different time. Especially if we drive or we go in a train. That's definitely time. You get some earbuds. Earbuds.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to make sure everybody knows what I'm talking about. You get some earbuds and you put them in. I mean, you use technology. I use technology like that. And it's really helpful. Okay, good question. Let me take one question from online. Hare Krishna. Gurudev, please. You mentioned that careful in dealing with devotees, even if we disagree. If someone is in management, having a position, doing lots of service, but lots of manipulation, you already criticized someone, and doing only what they like, and hear everyone, but do only what they only feel harassed by this. Devotees tolerate, but when should one speak up and talk to senior devotee or just tolerate? That's actually a good question. What should you do? Call the police. No, anyway. No, you can approach ISKCON is a hierarchical position, situation or organization. And so you approach the person's authority and you say, my dear GBC, or whatever it is, how should I deal with this? And also in ISKCON, we have this system of ADR. ADR means alternative dispute resolution. So we have people you can approach who will be very confidential. If you have a dispute with someone, they'll be very confidential, and they'll approach the other person without mentioning your name. And we have the system that's set up right now for that.
It
So
becomes difficult when the authority is corrupted as well.
we have to be very careful about thinking people are corrupted. People just may be a little bit misled by power. So, and we have to be compassionate. They're devotees, but they're just, somehow or other power went to the
Yeah, correct.
I don't use the word corrupted. That's a really heavy word to use for
With
Vaishnavas.
the emotion to it.
That I would say that someone, they're just confused,
Yeah.
carried away. We have to be very careful when dealing with Vaishnavas. People have dedicated their whole lives.
It's the offense. To
And actually, that's our judgment too. Our judgment may not be objective. It usually isn't. So we have to be very, very careful. So therefore, we approach senior people without committing offenses, and we say that so-and-so said this to me, or won't allow me to do this, or whatever it is, and could you please help me understand how to deal with it. That's all. I mean, if you deal with objective facts rather than judgments, it's a lot easier, and then you won't be committing offenses. You just say, so-and-so said, "You're going?"
No, they're just getting stuff from the car.
So-and-so said this. What should I do about it? That's an objective fact. But when you say, so-and-so is a rascal demon, and you somehow you made him, put him in position, I mean, so it's corrupt. It's so heavy, that word corrupt, isn't it? It's corrupted. Guru Maharaj is corrupted. He's eating too much. They're feeding him too much. It's like that story of Ramchandra Puri. People feed me too much and they say, he's in Maya because he ate too much.
I was going to say, also in the process, sometimes what happens, tolerance is good. Tolerance with knowledge from the
Yeah.
Shastra is really good. It's very healthy and strength there.
Yeah.
Then again, sometimes when it happens over the time, what happens, it gets ingrained into the consciousness. So, and that affects one's bhakti as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying you tolerate an injustice. That's not really what I'm talking about. But you speak about it in the proper circles without engaging in, again, an ad hominem attack on the person. There's heavy language. It's really good to avoid heavy language, corrupted, evil, demon. It's really good to avoid those particular words. Then you approach. If something is affecting you, the way an authority is dealing with you, then you approach ombudsperson, or ISKCON ombudsperson, or you approach the higher authority, or you consult with your friends. How do I deal with this? I'm not saying toleration. That's not my point. I don't think that people should be just tolerated, because then it's traumatic to just tolerate an abusive situation. Okay. Any other questions? I mean, a lot of interesting. Yeah.
Maharaj, you were mentioning about the Vaikuntha planets, like the 7 gates. I
Yeah.
was wondering, because there is no miscreants in Vaikuntha planets, why do they have so much gates and gatekeepers? And also the Narayana form, he has a Shankar and Chakra.
Yeah.
Why do he has weapons?
Because he likes it. He doesn't need to use the weapons in the spiritual world, but he likes it. It's fun. Because Narayan is also Rasa Raj. He's enjoying different rasas. So even if there's no demons in the spiritual world, there may be like a rumor. Prabhupada says there may be like a rumor of demons, that there's demons there. So it's just like, it's chivalrous then. Sometimes people carry around well, here they don't. Carry out, talking about America. Everyone carries around a gun. Anyway, one of my close friends, associates who lives close to the temple, he carries a gun around 24 hours a day. He sleeps with it. He puts it by his pillow. This is America,
People in Australia carry knives.
What?
They carry knives in Australia instead of guns.
Really? So it's like that. It's part of their persona. Even though he's not going to shoot his wife, hopefully. Yeah, at least the children obey him. Yeah. He just says, "Okay, time to go to school." Yeah, you have a choice. You either go to school or get shot.
But in US, you got to worry he might pull out his own.
Yeah. Yeah, the
Make
child.
sure yours is bigger.
That's funny. All right, so I think it's time to end. Someone just asked a question when I talk about multitasking. He says, so should we do things while listening to your class? I said, well, I mean, you could take in a walk or something like that. I listen to Prabhupada's class sometimes when I'm walking and driving. I mean, that's fine. But, whatever. If you have some service, you can be cooking for the deities or something like that. I mean, that's practical. I mean, I sometimes eat prasadam during GBC meetings, so. All right, I think we have to end.